There's a New York Times interview in the New York Times Magazine on a gentleman by the name of Roland Griffiths. Roland Griffiths. That I just wanted to go over. So the New York Times is covering him. If you don't know him, he was at the or he still is at the at Johns Hopkins University. And I'm going to share my screen. I'm actually going to read the article because, well, his journey is quite an interesting journey. And he was a very involved meditator, did a lot of different various techniques of meditation. And I found his interview to be quite amazing, and also very relevant, obviously, to a number of different topics that we've talked about. We've talked about death. We've talked about the beauty of the moment, sort of taking it all in, this extraordinary, as we practice mindfulness, this extraordinary moment that arises. So the title of the article is "A Psychedelics Pioneer Takes the Ultimate Trip." So a bit of pun on words here. But he's probably one of the world's leading researchers on psychedelics, mostly what we would call mushrooms, or the psilocybe, the compound in mushrooms that is psilocybe, that is the psychedelic. And he is the founding director. So I'm just going to read this, and I put the link in the thing there. As the founding director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research, Dr. Roland Griffiths has been a pioneer in investigating the way in which psychedelics can help treat depression, addiction, and in patients with life-threatening cancer diagnosis, psychological distress. He has also looked at how the use of psychedelics can produce transformative and long-lasting feelings of human interconnectedness and unity. One could surely classify his achievements using various medical and scientific terms, but I'll just put it like this. Griffiths has expanded the knowledge of how we might better learn to live. Well, that's pretty powerful, right? Now he is learning to die. Griffiths, who is 76 years old, has been diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic colon cancer. It's a diagnosis in all likelihood terminal that for him has brought forth transcendently positive feelings about existence and what he calls the great mystery of consciousness. We all know that we're terminal, says Griffith, who since being diagnosed has established an endowment at Johns Hopkins to study psychedelics and their potential for increasing human flourishing. So I believe that in principle, we shouldn't need this stage 4 cancer diagnosis to awaken. I'm excited to communicate, to shake the bars and tell people, come on, let's wake up. All right. That happens a lot. All right, so I'm going to put the link in the article. It was a New York Times article, an interview with Roland Griffiths. If you don't know him, he's a researcher at Johns Hopkins who's really brought a lot of really good research to the world of psychedelics. He's been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. He's 76 years old, and many times, many times we use life-threatening illnesses as a way to step back, as a way to, as he calls it, wake up. And essentially what he's saying, and I think he's giving a really important message to all of us, is why don't we wake up prior and not have to wait for not have to wait for a life-threatening illness to appreciate the moment, to appreciate this life as much as we can. Can we start with your current prognosis? He laughs. Prognosis is a 50% chance that I'll make it to Halloween. What does it say here? Soon after we spoke, Griffiths was removed from the drug trial he was participating in because of a lack of positive results. That likely means his survival timeline is now shorter than it was at the time of our interview. And how are you feeling about this? In spite of that, life has been more beautiful, more wonderful than ever. When I first got that diagnosis, because I work out regularly, I watch my diet, I sleep well, this came out of left field. There was this period in which it felt like I was going to wake up and say, boy, that was, to put it in psychedelic language, a bummer, a bad dream. But soon after that, I started to contemplate the different psychological states that would be naturally forthcoming with a diagnosis of mine. Depression, anxiety, denial, anger, or adopting some belief system of religious outcomes, which as a scientist, I was not cut out to do. I went through those, exploring what life would be like if I inhabited those reactions, and quickly concluded that was not a wise way to live. I have a long-term meditation practice. Griffiths practices Vipassana meditation, which comes out of the Buddhist tradition. A lot of the Vipassana meditation techniques we have worked on during our mindfulness practice here. And the focus there is on the nature of mind, of consciousness, and one comes to see that thoughts, emotions are transient. They're appearances of mind that you needn't identify with. That practice and some experience with psychedelics was increasingly useful because what I recognize is that the best way to be with this diagnosis was to practice gratitude for the preciousness of our lives. Grasping for the cure wasn't useful. Actually, we just got back another blood result that was an indication as to whether the cancer is progressing. My wife, Marla, and I say to each other, no matter what this shows, it's perfect. Indeed, it showed a big jump in this blood marker, which wouldn't be something to celebrate. It is what it is. It's real. And what's more fun than reality? You're 76. You had a long, full life. Is your perspective maybe one that a 40-year-old, say, with a terminal cancer diagnosis would be able to inhabit so profoundly? I've always lived under this illusion that I'm about 30 years younger than I am. I was feeling completely healthy at the time of diagnosis. I was not about to wind down anything. As a scientist, it's like a kid in the candy store with respect to what questions need to be answered about psychedelics and the theme of the endowment and human flourishing. We were continuing to build out the center. I was more deeply engaged than ever in feeling that I was about 35. This was not in my game plan. You talk about cancer almost as if it's a gift. Does that mean you don't have regrets about what's happening? My life has never been better. If I had a regret, it's that I didn't wake up as much as I have without a cancer diagnosis. It's been incredible. There have been so many positive things. My relationship with my children, my grandchildren, my siblings, my wife. Marla and I have lived together for 11 years and felt that it was unimportant to get married. Then at dinner one evening, I asked Marla, would it be emotionally important to you now to be married? She thought about it the next day. She said, it would. Immediately, it became important to me. We were just married in our living room with my 3 children and 2 of our best friends. It was beyond beautiful. So do I have any regrets? No, but my concern is principally for Marla and how she's going to deal with this. We've talked about my passing as being an opportunity. like my diagnosis, to wake up, because these are opportunities to use events that could be labeled and experienced as miserable, but don't need to be. Right? That's very powerful. Right? In essence, he's kind of saying that he has a choice, which many of us would think that maybe we don't have a choice, right? And sort of interesting how he was able to look at the different psychological states and say that, of anxiety, depression, despair, whatever it might be, and just sort of say that's not really not really where I'd like to go for the last few months of my life, despite being given this, terminal illness. Have you taken psychedelics since getting your diagnosis? Yes. After getting the diagnosis, I had no immediate interest in psychedelics. I felt in many respects that I was having a very psychedelic-like experience. There was this awakening, this aliveness, and I hesitated to take a psychedelic because I wondered whether it was going to disrupt that. Then a question arose. Is there something I'm avoiding by not taking a psychedelic? Am I defending against some dark, fearful thing I'm in denial about? Am I papering it over with this story of how great I'm doing, and actually I'm scared to death? I thought, well, this would be an interesting stress test. So I did a session with a psychedelic. He used LSD, and went into that explicitly asking a couple of questions. First, asking myself, is there something I am not dealing with? The answer came back, no. The joy you're experiencing is great. This is how it should be. Then I asked the question directly of the cancer. I'm hesitant to talk about it because it's reifying the cancer as other, and I don't hold that the cancer is some other with which I can have a dialogue. But as a metaphor, it's an interesting way to probe that question. So I asked the cancer, what are you doing here? What can you tell me about what's going on? I got nothing back. Then I wanted to humanize it, and I said, I really respect you. I talk about you as a blessing. I've had this astonishing sense of well-being and gratitude despite everything that's happening, and so I want to thank you. This process, is it going to kill me? The answer was yes. You will die, but everything is absolutely perfect. There's meaning and purpose to this that goes beyond your understanding, but how you're managing that is exactly how you should manage it. So then I said, okay, there's purpose and meaning. I'm not ungrateful for the opportunity, but how about giving me more time? I got no response to that, but that's okay. How else have psychedelics, both studying them and using them, help prepare you for death? Our first study was in cancer patients. Ironically enough, these were cancer patients who were depressed and anxious because of a life-threatening diagnosis. The findings of that study were profound. A single treatment of psilocybin produced large and enduring decreases in depression and anxiety. I've had some limited experience with psychedelics since then. But what did that teach me about my diagnosis? We've now treated hundreds of participants with psychedelics, and before sessions, one of the key things that we teach them is that upon taking a psychedelic, there's going to be an explosion of inner experiences. What we ask them to do with those experiences, be interested and curious. Be interested and curious. That is profound. All right, because how many times have we said with an open curiosity? Right, whatever arises in this moment with an openness and a curiosity, and what else in the definition of mindfulness do we use? With a willingness to be with what is, right? An openness and a curiosity, to investigate everything that is arising with an openness and curiosity. Okay, and we do that every day. You don't have to figure anything out. You're going to have guides, and we're going to create this safety container around you. But here's the trick. These are not necessarily feel-good experiences. People can have experiences in which they feel like they come to this beautiful understanding of who they are and what the world is. But people can also have frightening experiences. The preparation we give for these experiences is to stay with them. Be curious and recognize the ephemeral nature of them. If you do that, you're going to find that they change. The metaphor we use is imagine that you're confronted with the most frightening demon you can imagine. It's made by you, for you, to scare you. I'll say, there's nothing in consciousness that can hurt you. So what you want to do is be deeply curious, and if anything, approach it. It's your natural tendency. If your natural tendency is to run, it can chase you for the entire sessions. But if you can see it as an appearance of mind, then you go, oh, that's scary. But yeah, I'm going to investigate that. Here's the scary thing that appears. Where is it coming from? My thoughts. It's an appearance of the mind. It's coming. It might be a demon, the scariest demon we can imagine. And here it is. It's in that corner. It's in the corner of my mind. I can see it. It's in that left lower corner where it's dark. And what do? Right? How many times do we just keep running? Can't go there. Don't want to go there. Don't want to see it. Don't want to look at it. Don't want to look at it. Right? Instead, we turn to it with an openness and a curiosity. This is really scary, but I'm going to look at it. Right? Okay, you can choose to investigate the experience rather than identify with it. But let me ask you this. The approach that you're describing is pretty far from the typical mindset of many doctors who are working within a framework of curing, fixing, prevention. So if the ultimate goal is to help more otherwise healthy people get safe access to the potential benefits of using psychedelics, wouldn't that require a radical rethinking by medical practitioners about what helping people even means? Yes, it will. One of the inspirations for the endowment is that it's not aimed at patient populations. It's not aimed at reducing clinically recognized suffering. Right now, there's money pouring into this area, but that's all going to be patient related. There's a pathway to medical approval. I do have concerns that we don't replicate the mistakes that occurred in the 1960s, which over-promoted psychedelics used culture-wide. They're so powerful that if misaligned with cultural institutions, they can result in cultural kickback. In the 1960s, they became aligned with the anti-war movement and radicalized youth movement that was terrifying to existing political structures and institutions. And as a consequence, legislation which put up against them, funding dried up. They were considered a third rail in academic research. We need to proceed cautiously. It's going to be critically important not to threaten existing cultural institutions. So I've been a proponent of medicalization because with medicalization, we already have regulatory structure in place. It's going through FDA approval. They're going to set standards to maximize safety by specifying who should be eligible to receive, who is authorized to prescribe, and under what conditions treatment should occur. So I'm cautious, but that's why I'll have the endowment in perpetuity. If we look at the long range, this could be critical to the survival of our species. It is Griffiths' belief that humanity has developed and is developing technologies that could threaten its ongoing survival. He also believes that psychedelic experiences can provide the basis for moral and ethical principles that would lessen the likelihood that humanity will drive itself off a cliff. Because there's something about the nature of these experiences under these certain conditions that produce remarkable experiences of interconnectedness of all things. At the deepest level, if we recognize we're all in this together, then we have the kernel of what I suspect is most religious traditions and impulses, and that it's realizing that the golden rule makes a lot of sense. I've noticed that often when you discuss human consciousness and our awareness of the preciousness of life, you talk about those things as an awe-inspiring mystery. What do you get out of putting it into those terms? Because consciousness may be a mystery now, but I've read theories that are convincing to a layperson that, like me, that thoughts come from emotions, and our emotions are one of the body's mechanisms of maintaining homeostasis. Or as far as the awareness that life is precious, I could easily imagine that biophilia has evolutionarily advantages. So I don't see why these states of being have to be understood as mysteries. Does it diminish them to see them as explainable? No. I can easily inhabit and evolutionarily account that explains how we have come to be who we are, with the exception of the question of interiority. Why would evolution waste its precious energy on our having interior experiences at all? I don't get that. To me, it's a very precious mystery. And that mystery, if you want to put it in religious terms, is God. It's the unknowable. It's unfathomable. I don't believe in God as conceptualized within different religious traditions, but the mystery thing is something that strikes me as undeniable. Why do you struggle with this? There must be something. Marla and I had just adopted a dog, and that's brought us incredible joy. Then we got some test results back suggesting the possibility of kidney failure. That's been more difficult than dealing with my own diagnosis. We might both be on a parallel course of expiry. That's difficult for me and doubly difficult for Marla. I can say acutely that this gives me something new to work with. It's just accepting what is real and then appreciating that in the context of celebration of life. In some ways, if I knew that this precious dog is also facing a terminal condition, there may be a beautiful synergy there. I'm not going to rule out that possibility as well. So you have this sense near the end of your life of waking up to life's real meaning. What's the most important thing for everyone else who's still asleep to know? I want everyone to appreciate the joy and wonder of every single moment of their lives. We should be astonished that we are here when we look around at the exquisite wonder and beauty of everything. I think everyone has a sense of that already. It's leaning into that more fully. There is a reason every day to celebrate that we're alive, that we have another day to explore whatever this gift is of being conscious, of being aware that we are aware. That's the deep mystery that I keep talking about. That's to be celebrated. So, whether or not Roland Griffiths he's an incredible human being. Prior to actually getting into psychedelics, he had a huge meditation practice, 20 years of meditation. Okay, has a very strong meditation practice, and you can see that last paragraph, right? We've talked about that last paragraph. We've talked about over and 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 over again, and that to me is. I come to that same conclusion too, right? Is as every single moment, to investigate it with that openness and curiosity, and to see the mystery, right? To that and just appreciate it, to let it flow, that beauty of the moment, the life that we're actually living right now, how much of a miracle it actually is that we're here, that we're aware, that we're able to taste, that we're able to experience this, we're able to connect in these ways. And that's kind of, I think that's the message of mindfulness as well. And so I wanted to share that with you as a New York Times article, very powerful. From multiple perspectives, but it's sort of like, hey, let's wake up, world, and just recognize the beauty of the moment.